To order.
I love you.
Thank you. I love you.
Good morning. It's a meeting of the State Board of Pharmacy. We'll start out by roll call. Do you want to start out, Greg?
Greg Lippy, public member.
Lavanza Butler, professional member.
Victor Law, professional member.
Stan Weiser, professional member.
Debbie Veal, professional member.
Amy Gutierrez, professional member.
Alan Chad, professional member.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Okay, now we're going to open up for public comments for items that are not on the agenda or agenda items for future meetings. Is there any member of the public that would like to come up and speak? Okay, you have a general announcement?
You may not get a free lunch, but I have 10% off if you want to eat lunch here. So I have coupons.
Discount coupons.
If you give them
Here,
10,
I'll put them in the back of the room.
Jenny, if you give them 10, do they get 100% off?
You're the accountant in the room. I'm not getting
Does it work that way, Greg? All right, moving on to item 3, which is approval of the, we'll take them one at a time, the July 12th, 2016 minutes. Do you have some changes? Not that one? Or is it another one? Okay, the July 12th, 2016 minutes. Are there any changes to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain because I was at the meeting.
Okay, abstention by Stan. All right, the next one is the July 27 to 28th.
So moved.
Is that the one you have changes?
No, I had changes.
Okay.
I think Debbie had some,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my.
or was it the August 31st or September?
I just had a little.
Do you want to give them to us later? Or are they more?
No, they're all immaterial.
They're all immaterial?
So they're just technical
Okay.
Like,
corrections?
one's like, on the, so, yeah, they're all pretty much immaterial. One, there was a reference to the take back where it had said schedule 3 to 4, and we wanted to make it 2 to 4. Yeah, and so they put in the minutes like 2. They had the wrong numbers.
Okay.
So-
Another one, I think they had Chairman Lippy instead of Chairman Veal, and,
Yeah, we can understand.
no, because I am not bald.
Excuse me. Excuse me, that's Chairperson Veal.
But yeah, I'll give them to you.
Okay, so they're not some non-substantive changes?
I would agree.
Okay, all right, so.
If I can, so if you do have changes, I think so that the board is aware of what those changes are, I would actually recommend maybe tabling that
Yeah,
and then
let's
dealing with
Okay,
it tomorrow.
my computer's up, so I can actually.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Good morning.
Okay, I'll use this microphone. Okay, on electronic page 46, which, how do I find the page? Oh, shoot, now I'm all over the place. So it's actual page 43 of the July 27, 28. Oh, I think I just lied. It's page 42. At the top, it says, during the discussion, board members changed the wording of section 1776.1E3 and 77.4I3 from scheduled 2 to 5 to 2 to, oh, I'm sorry, that's correct. I misread it. So scratch that one. Gosh, I should have on the pages.
Do you want some time to go over it? We can just
Yeah.
table, we
Yeah.
can just table the
Yeah,
minutes.
and I'll write down the pages.
So is this is the only, is it 27 to 28? Did you have changes to that one too? Let's just table the rest
Yeah,
of them.
Okay, I'm sorry.
For the next, it's okay.
Why don't you do the 50th pharmacy? and then
Yeah,
I'll
we'll do
come back.
that, definitely. Okay, so we're moving on to item 4, which is recognition and celebration of pharmacists that are licensed in California for 50 years. So we'll start out with Bruce Betancourt. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good to see you. Okay, one of these. Okay, we need to stand over here. Please. Okay. How are you today?
Great.
Well, and thank you so much. You're one of the first pharmacists actually has given me a really good summary of your background, so it's very much appreciated. Bruce is a second-generation pharmacist who was born in Santa Cruz, and he attended local schools until college. He attended UOP, it was called College of the Pacific then.
It was when I started.
And then transferred to Oregon State University, and he obtained his bachelor's in pharmacy, graduating in 1966, and licensed in both Oregon and California. He owned 2 pharmacies in Santa Cruz for 47 years before selling his practice and working in Safeway for 3 years. During the 47 years, he also left his practice in good hands and worked for Pfizer as a consultant in community pharmacy for 5 years, returning to continue to educate his patients on how to properly use his medications. He worked with Little League Baseball, soccer leagues, and basketball with local youth group. He's also a past president of the Scotts Valley Lions Club. In 1988, he was elected president of CPHA and held many offices with them over the years and currently serves on the Audit and Finance Committee for CPHA. It's a great honor, he states, to have been involved with a wonderful and resourceful group of people for over 50 years. He hopes that corporate America will allow pharmacists to continue to provide outstanding service to our patients in future years. Congratulations, Bruce.
Thank you very much. It's covered it all. No, usually I talk too much, so I'm saying nothing today.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your years. You've certainly had a very illustrious career and has been involved in quite a few different ventures. Here is your 50-year pen.
Thank you very much.
Now, do you have anyone with you today?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, it's okay. We'll take a picture together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan Bryant. Dan Bryant here? Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you today? Oh, you write very well. Pharmacists are good handwriting experts. It's the doctors you can't trust.
My wife does not let me write checks.
Oh, dear. Oh, okay.
There might be another reason there.
Well, good morning to you. So you worked at, your summary says that you worked at Walgreens in Payless, and it was, you had quite a few years in working there. Now, all your 50 years you worked there?
I worked for Walgreens, yes, the 2 of them.
Okay.
I worked Walgreens first, then I went to Payless, and went back to Walgreens.
Okay. Where did you go to school?
At Texas Southern.
Texas Southern. Okay, very good. Do you have anyone here with you today?
I have my daughter.
Come on up.
My sister.
And
one of my students. She's been a pharmacist.
Oh, wow. Well, come on up and take a picture. Do you want all of them to come up and take the picture with you? Yes, come on up. So where do you live? What part of the state?
I live in San Jose.
Oh, really close. Okay.
I was working, but my wife had to become a caretaker for her. So I've always been involved in church, and that's the thing that helped me the most in pharmacy was church.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
It was great. Wonderful people, wonderful mentors, absolutely great patients. Still see them, they hug me, and they say, I miss you, so it really moves you.
So do you want to introduce the people that are here with you?
This is Vanessa. She was one of my students, I think, in 1999. My sister Betty, my daughter Sandra.
Great. Now, are you a pharmacist?
She's a pharmacist, yeah.
Where do you work?
I actually interned with him at Payless, and then I followed him to Walgreens.
She's right in your footsteps. That's great. Well, you've left a good legacy. Thank you. Thank you. Take a picture. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have George Lee. I had the pleasure of meeting George a few minutes ago. So George has worked as a pharmacy manager for 40 years. So you've been a leader, leading our profession. He's been working for about 10 years as an agency pharmacist, and we have some mutual friends. And he's been working at Community Regional Medical Center for about 9 years and owned his own store for 10 years after now I remember Gemco Pharmacy. Anyone remember Gemco Pharmacy? That's where he worked when it closed in the late 80s. And you're still working now.
I am.
And where are you working?
I worked at Community Regional Medical Center in Fresno. Just a couple of days a week, not very often.
That's great. And you're in the Central Valley, so.
Central Valley in Fresno.
Very good.
Yeah, do a lot of volunteer work at the hospital, which is very good, very rewarding.
Now, you went to a pharmacy school outside of California.
I did. I went to the University of Utah School of Pharmacy in Salt Lake City.
Great, and then came back to serve California.
California, back to Fresno, where I was born and raised.
Well, congratulations. Now, who do you have here of your family?
My wife.
Want to come? You want to come up?
My sister.
Oh, who would you like to come up for your picture? Yes. Yes, your wife. Your wife has to come. Your wife has to come. Okay. All right. Come on up.
Come on up. Yeah.
Here's your pen, George. There you go. Congratulations. Come on up, everyone.
I think I'll get in this.
That's a big group.
I don't.
Can you get us all there? Yes.
Those two up here, too.
Oh, come on.
Yes, give us.
Yeah, Janice, could you start it closer? Is it on video? It's on video. Can you get us all?
Now bring up the next 3 items.
Now, do we have a fourth one, Debbie? Or is that?
Very nice. Somebody had a baby.
That's always exciting. All right, you ready for your minutes?
I'm ready.
All right, Debbie. So we're talking about the July 27 to 28th
Yeah, if
minutes.
you go to page 74, it says, in the second paragraph, it says Chairperson Lippy, and I believe that should be Chairperson Veal.
Egotist.
That's the only one on the July minutes.
Okay. So with that change, is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
So moved.
Correction. Sorry.
Okay, motion by Stan or by Greg? Well, it has to be because of, yeah,
This has
the
to
name change there, okay. And second by Stan. Any public comment? All those in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, that unanimous? All right, moving on to August 31st, 2016. Do you have any changes to that one?
I do not.
Okay. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second? Cheryl, second? All right, any public comment on August 31st minutes? Otherwise, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. September 22nd, 2016, any changes to that?
I have one change to that one.
Yes.
It's on page 4 of September 22. It's in the motion and that Cheryl and I made. But I believe if you look back up, our motion was to say that that it's not a board-specific meeting, it's more of a forum, because just in case we didn't have enough, it was based, the executive officer suggested this, and in case there wasn't enough people to make the forum, a board meeting, that it could still be a hearing of the board. So I think there's just a slight correction of the motion.
Okay. So
it should say, if you kind of go up a couple paragraphs, it's, should be set up as a forum to be organized as a board meeting, but if quorum's not available, then it'll be held as a committee meeting or a hearing of the board, and then the rest of it's correct.
Okay, with that change, is there a motion for approval?
I'll make it.
Stan, second?
Second.
Second, Victor? Motion with a change. Any public comment? Otherwise, all those in favor? Okay, minutes are approved. Moving on to item 5, update from DCA. Jenny?
Shelley, are you going to be doing this? Okay, this is Shelley Jones. She's from the Department of Consumer Affairs. And once you get to the microphone, we'll let you finish the introduction for yourself. If you'd like to add more, have at it.
Good morning, Shelley.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I just want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share with you today all that's happening at DCA. We have a lot of things to share with you this morning. Again, I am Shelley Jones, and I'm a manager with the DCA's Board and Bureau Relations team. So let's see. On September 7th, the Director Kodani, held a director's meeting with executive officers and board presidents. The purpose of the director's meeting was to update board leadership on the department's activities, share important information, and answer questions. Several items contained in my report today were shared at that meeting. First, I want to update the board on changes to the department's executive team. Back in May, after 8 years with the department, Chief Deputy Director Tracy Ryan accepted a new job with the Rural County Representatives of California. In late June, Governor Brown appointed Jeff Mason as our new Chief Deputy Director. Jeff has been with the department since 2013, serving as Chief for the Bureau of Security and Investigative Services, and most recently as Chief Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Real Estate. Jeff was sworn into office a couple months ago, and we are excited to have him on board. Also in May, Melinda McLean, who was our Deputy Director for Legislation and Regulatory Review, accepted a position in the Governor's office. In late July, Governor Brown announced his appointment of Adam Quinones as the Legislative Deputy. Adam had previously served with Melinda as the Assistant Deputy Director for Legislation. And then finally, DCA's Assistant Chief Counsel, Tamara Colson. She was appointed as Assistant Chief Counsel for the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation in May. The Governor appointed Ryan Marcroft. He was previously a Deputy Attorney General at California Department of Justice, and he appointed him in August to replace Ms. Colson, and we're happy to welcome him to our DCA team as well. I also wanted to update you on the Governor's Regulatory Review Program. Review and approval of fiscal impact statements are required for all proposed regulations prior to submission of a notice of proposed action to OAL. Since 2009, the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency has waived this requirement for all DCA boards. Given an increase in the number of rulemaking packages disapproved by OAL due to issues of clarity and necessity, agency has rescinded this waiver effective September 7th of this year. So therefore, prior to noticing any approved regulatory packages at OAL, all boards must first submit them to the department and agency for review and approval. Rulemaking packages should be submitted to the department's Division of Legislative and Regulatory Review. The department is committed to ensuring this is a timely process that impacts the boards as minimally as possible. If you have any questions about the new process, you can contact Adam Quinones in the Legislative Regulatory Unit.
Yeah, Jenny, is that going to involve a change for us? Because we usually go to the department, or do we?
This is an upfront review, so before the board can actually do with a 45-day notice, the state and Business, Consumer Services and Housing wants an opportunity to review the rulemaking file at that point. So we're hoping that we can do it relatively quickly, because the goal would be is to not have another 90 days added at the front end before we can even do the 45 days. The administration is very aware that some of the boards have grave concerns about an additional delay, and it sounds like our agency is going to work with us to kind of mitigate it. I offered an alternative process, and I don't think that they're going to do it, which is basically that simultaneously with it going to the board as finalized language, it would go to them to be reviewed, and then we add any comments that they provide in at the same time we do the 15-day comment period after we notice it for 45 days. But I don't think they want to do that. I think for whatever reason, they want it up front even before we notice it.
What is the reason behind it?
The concern is that somehow or another, the upfront review will reduce the number of rulemaking files that the Office of Administrative Law is disapproving. We've had one disapproved, maybe two disapproved, but this is kind of, most agencies are having a number of rulemakings disapproved for various reasons. And so in an attempt to try to prevent some problems at the front end, they're looking at doing it this way. It actually, in one sense, if the administration wants to provide comments on a regulation, to me, it makes more sense to get the comments at the front end than at the rear end so that the administration knows what we're dealing with. And so they can participate and provide comments then. But, again, if it adds delay, it already takes, the whole rulemaking process is taking too long.
Well, and I know we're going to talk about it in the ledger regulator, but there's been so many delays we've experienced with some of our regulations. How much time is this expected to be added on to our current rulemaking?
Well, for us, for all intents and purposes, if it's put on and then we have to wait to notice it, it could be at least 90 days because it would be between board meetings. And that has been expressed to the administration, so they are aware of it.
I think Laura wants to say something.
So, because this is going to be a review prior to issuing the notice, there may be a little bit of authority that the board can give its executive officer. It'll depend on the nature of the comments that you get back from agency, but so that it doesn't, there may be situations where you get feedback from agencies that maybe address clarity issues as opposed to policy, and there may be ways that when you adopt the language, that we delegate a certain amount of authority to the EO at the beginning, pre-notice, to maybe amend the language to address some of the concerns. Because I think what we heard was the primary concern, I think it was, one of them was clarity. And so to the extent that they're simply trying to clarify language, maybe restructuring or something like that, the board could authorize the EO to make those kinds of changes to language so that it wouldn't necessarily have to wait to come back to the full board before it actually gets noticed.
So this is before the board actually sees the language?
No.
No,
So
after you finalize the language.
Right.
But
So
before it's released for 45 days of comment.
Okay,
Right.
got it. So we could then delegate authority.
Yes, I think as long as it was consistent with the board's wishes, if you're dealing solely in clarity issues. Now, if there's a big policy hole that needs to be filled in, that would probably be inappropriate.
But that would be different in that discussion as a primary benefit of doing it this way so that we take care of it at the front end. However, to me, it's still a 15-day comment period for correction in the event we need to fix the regulation to accommodate what agency needs. And if that's the case, it can be combined with a 45-day comment period relatively smoothly because you'll have both sets of comments. We treat them essentially as part of the 45-day comment.
You mean, right, under the proposal that you'd recommended. Yeah.
So is this legal review or who in the department reviews it?
It's not the department so much as it is agency, and I'm not quite sure who's going to review it over there. But they do have an attorney and they do have various administrative staff.
So do we need to take some action if we wanted to move forward and let Ginny, our executive officer, have delegated?
So I think what I would recommend, this applies to any new regulations that aren't already in the works. So any action that the board takes today would be subject to it. And I can certainly come up with some suggestions when you get to those items on your agenda that would allow her to make maybe clarifying changes.
So if you
it's
just
a little bit
modification of the motion, we need to put
right.
some
So you're used to me
Candy,
suggesting that she has authority to make non-substantive changes. I think this might go a little bit beyond a true non-substantive change, but maybe the ability for her to make clarifying changes consistent with the policy directed by the board. And that kind of authority, I think, what it means from the board's perspective is that the noticed language that goes out to the public might not be exactly what the board looked at. And so if that's a concern for the board, then you might not want to delegate that, but to the extent that you can Trust that Ginny has a good, or your executive officer has a solid understanding of the board's wishes, then I think you could
So you can
do
draft
that.
some language for us that we can consider the next time we go down this road.
Right.
Okay.
And I
Thank you.
think you do have some items on the ledge agenda.
Great, thank you. Okay. Sorry.
No problem, not a problem. On October 27th, the department will be hosting its annual distributed costs review and open house for executive officers, bureau chiefs, and board presidents. This meeting will take place at the department's hearing room in Sacramento and will cover the department's budgeting process and how costs are distributed. Example of one would be pro rata. To all of the boards and bureaus. Following presentations, attendees will be able to visit with staff from all of the department's individual units in order to learn more about the services provided by the department, as well as have access to the individuals running these units. The department will also provide attendees with an updated version of its guide to distributed costs and services, which outlines the budget process, how costs are distributed, and the services provided by the department. An electronic copy of this guide will be sent out to all board members following the open house. As most of you are aware, SB 1194, authorized by Senator Hill, Chair of the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee, was the legislation which contained several provisions to address the antitrust issues presented by the North Carolina Board of Dental Examiners versus the Federal Trade Commission, U.S. Supreme Court decision of February 2015. The department worked with the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development and various stakeholders to clarify the proposed regulation review process for the department director. At the Assembly Committee hearing on August 25th, Senator Hill pulled the bill from consideration this legislative session. He has indicated that he would like to convene additional stakeholder discussions to address concerns raised at that committee hearing, and we'll keep you apprised as we learn more. On October 4th, 2016, the Little Hoover Commission released its report entitled Jobs for Californians, Strategies to Ease Occupational Licensing Barriers. The director issued a memo to all board and bureaus on October 25th, providing a copy of the report and requesting feedback from executive officers and bureau chiefs on the report and its proposed recommendations. The Commission's report calls for a comprehensive review of the state occupational licensing system, asserting that it increasingly stands in the way of employment and upward mobility, especially for former criminal offenders, veterans, military spouses, and those who are foreign trained and educated. The issue of reciprocity, that is to say, issuing a license to an applicant licensed in another state, is also addressed in the report. DCA is currently reviewing the Commission's report and recommendations and will provide additional, more detailed information to the boards and bureaus at a later date. The department has implemented a process to assist boards with onboarding new executive officers. We believe this will greatly assist boards bringing on new leaders. Part of the process includes making all DCA division heads available to the new EO for a briefing on the services provided by that division and the work currently in process between the division and the board. For example, the Division of Legislative and Regulatory Review would meet with the new EO to review recently passed and pending legislation impacting the board, as well as to discuss the legislative and regulatory process. DCA will also provide the new EO with information on the department and the board, such as contact lists, strategic plans, organizational charts, and fund conditions that will help bring the new EO up to speed. While on the subject of training, just a quick reminder that board members are required to complete orientation training within 1 year of their appointment and reappointment. The final board member orientation training for this year will be held on November 16th at DCA headquarters in Sacramento.
And I get to help train.
Board members are also required to complete ethics, sexual harassment prevention, and defensive driver training. A reminder regarding the required trainings was emailed to all DCA board members on September 9th. This email included details on training frequency and registration. You can contact the Board and Bureau Relations Office if you need assistance. And as a quick housekeeping item, just a reminder that the governor's executive order limiting in-state and out-of-state travel for mission-critical purposes does remain in effect. Mission critical is defined as travel directly related to enforcement activities and responsibilities, auditing, revenue collection, travel required by statute, contract, or executive order, and job required training necessary to maintain licensure or hold a position. On the IT front, the department's Office of Information Services is working with the California Department of Technology to migrate our email services to an Office 365 model. The current CES platform will be retired in October of 2017. The new model includes enhanced features that include increased inbox storage, availability of corporate social networking to allow collaboration across departments and locations, unlimited online meetings, video conferencing and Skype for business application, personal file storage, and online versions of Microsoft Office applications. As you may know, the department's Solid Training and Planning Solutions unit is dedicated to organizational development and offers a wide array of services to DCA's boards and bureaus. On Wednesday, September 28th, the third Solid-sponsored Brown Bag Gathering for executive officers and bureau chiefs was held. The agenda included psychological safe workplaces, building a work philosophy, a peer panel, and an update on the Future Leadership Development Program. The peer panel included your own executive officer and the executive director of the Medical Board of California, the registrar for the Contractor State Licensing Board, and the deputy director of Board and Bureau Relations. The event was very highly rated by the participants, and Solid looks forward to holding additional brown bag gatherings in the future. We would like to thank Ms. Harold for her service, both to the department and her fellow executive officers. One of those initiatives discussed at the brown bag gatherings that we're very excited about is the creation of the Future Leadership Development Program. This initiative is designed to assist the department and its programs in growing the next generation of bureau chiefs and executive officers. The Future Leadership Development Program will have 3 parts to assist in the development of managers into executives. First will be training available and alongside current executive officers and bureau chiefs. Second will be mentorship opportunities from executives throughout the department and its boards and bureaus. And the third will be completion of special projects designed to benefit the participants as well as the department and its boards and bureaus. The projects will be designed to address specific problems or issues facing the department and its boards and bureaus, which are expected to be collected during the EO Brown Bag gatherings. Also, as part of DCA's strategic plan, Solid launched the Employee Career Empowerment and Mentorship Pilot Program in July. The pilot affords line staff a great deal of flexibility to learn from various participating managers. In addition to some DCA units, the boards and bureaus currently participating in this program are the Board of Optometry, the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians, Medical Board, Professional Fiduciaries Bureau, Bureau of Automotive Repair, Acupuncture Board, and the Bureau of Electronic and Appliance Repair, Home Furnishings, and Thermal Insulation. 100% of the participants surveyed recommended the pilot to other DCA employees, as well as expanding the pilot to other boards and bureaus. The pilot is voluntary, but if the board does wish to participate, they can contact Solid's manager, Damon Nelson. Finally, the department is developing a new strategic plan for years 2017 through 2019. One of the components of the strategic planning process is a survey of stakeholders. The survey will be distributed to stakeholders, including board members, in the next few weeks. Your feedback is vital, and we respectfully ask for your participation to assist us in improving the department's services. So that concludes my update. Thank you again for the opportunity to share what's happening at DCA.
Thank you, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah.
good.
You mentioned that November 16 is your last orientation class. Is anyone planned for next year in Southern California?
I do not know for sure. I know they are working on dates at this time. I can get back to you on it, though, and let you know for sure.
Actually, I can answer that.
Can you?
Probably no more in Southern California. It's too hard for them to go south, and so we're going to have everybody come up. It seems to be better. I know it's inconvenient for the individuals that have to travel to Sacramento, but the general feeling is it's better placed because you can have people from the governor's office attend and people from the department attend that otherwise wouldn't attend the training in Los Angeles or if it was somewhere else.
And so even in Sacramento, do you have any dates available for next year?
Not yet.
Not yet. It'll be generated after the meeting on the 16th.
And do you have the phone number for? I'd like the phone number for that helpline for finding out what's required and what's not.
Okay, you got it.
Actually, we can tell you, you mean the required training and where you are in the process?
Yeah, I think somebody's made a big error is what I'm thinking.
Well, since you're looking at me, I will take the responsibility for that. We will make sure we get you the proper and appropriate training.
Thank you, thank you.
I think he needs double training.
Well,
That's what I'm getting at.
I drew the line, let the record show I stopped short of making that assessment.
I think Laura was tracking it, would let us know when things are due.
She's
Laura
driving around
did,
very suspicious.
someone was, Debbie, did somebody just compiled a list of what training was required? Did that go to the individual board members? Not yet, I don't. Okay, well, we will make sure, the good news is, if you're required to do the board member orientation, we'll get you in.
Oh, how many times have I gone to that?
November 16th.
November 16th, every time after you get reappointed. If you didn't get reappointed so often, you wouldn't have to do it.
And/or reflective of his behavior, right?
Alan's just excited. He likes the extra training.
That's right. I
We-
do need
In all
that.
seriousness, we will advise you, because there was a list prepared in-house, and Laura does do that, but since she's out, we'll make sure that we've got this covered. Speaking of which, I just got something on that, just right in front of us. So,
Any other board member questions, comments? Thank you very much, Sally. Any public comments? Okay, moving on to the executive officer report. Ginny.
oh, goody. Okay, so let me get my agenda for the board meeting. Maybe.
Do you want me here? I got it.
No, I got it here. Okay, so I have several things I'd like to speak about briefly. One of them is on Halloween, we have an opportunity to speak before the Assembly Health Committee. We've been invited, and in fact, it's actually a command performance for the board. We were invited and asked to provide remarks. There is an informational hearing where the Assembly Health Committee is going to take a look at understanding the pharmaceutical supply chain, what is driving up the cost of drugs. Those of you in the room know that the board does not generally regulate on the basis of the price of drugs, that's outside our jurisdiction. The board members in the front of the room certainly will recognize that we have in the past taken action against a company where the cost of drugs was so high that it was viewed as moral turpitude. But absent that one case, we generally don't get involved in the price of drugs. So here's the agenda. I'm going to just quickly provide you with the 50,000-foot overview. There'll be opening remarks from the Assembly Health Committee, which is pretty standard in these kinds of informational hearings. Then there'll be a historical perspective on drug pricing that's provided by an economist. Then it goes into another division called the economics of pharmaceuticals, and here we have another, my guess is, economist that's going to be doing a 15-minute speech. They've actually had very narrow, short timelines for all of these presentations. Then we have drug pricing in other countries, and for that, Dr. Casselblanc, our former board member, is one of the speakers. The next topic is drug pricing in the pharmaceutical supply chain, and here's where we have, and this is the last major division, here is where we have our role. The National Association of Boards of Pharmacy is going to talk a little bit about the overview of the supply chain, and then I have been asked to speak a little bit about how the Board of Pharmacy regulates the supply chain. And then they've got a list of various stakeholders. They have, I have 5 minutes, as do the pharmaceutical manufacturers that will have 5 minutes each. Well, not each. The brand name manufacturers get 5 minutes. The generics get 5 minutes. The wholesale distributors get 5 minutes. The pharmacists get 5 minutes. Are you speaking, Brian? Have you been invited to do this?
Yeah, I have someone else speaking.
Okay. Well, that was close. The pharmacies are also speaking, and PBMs have 5 to 7 minutes. They're getting a little more time than the rest of us. Perhaps they have more to say. Emerging issues in the supply chain. The economist that started at the front end is now going to have an opportunity to speak for a few more minutes. And then they have Betsy Imholz, who is from Consumers Union, providing information on consumers' perspective in all of this. So I suspect that we may see a number of pieces of legislation arising following this hearing, but I don't have any idea where the Assembly is going. Any questions?
Steve Gray from Kaiser Permanente. In your list of stakeholders, I did not hear healthcare service plans. Were they listed?
As close as they got was PBMs.
two entirely different things. Is this
The rest
open to,
of it-
is this hearing open to the public?
Yes.
Oh, it's open to the
It's
public?
probably going to be televised. Let me see if it's televised. Not that they're going to admit to. So my guess is that it will be televised. It is on Monday, October 31st at 10 o'clock in the State Capitol, room 4202.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Come on up. Oh, we're getting handouts.
Good morning, I'm Steve Rosati. I'm a pharmacist in Hollister, and I was just happening to come to the board meeting today, and when I saw the executive officer's report on drug pricing, I couldn't help myself. So anyway, what I've done is I do understand the role of the Board of Pharmacy does not include any say over prescription pricing. My intentions are sharing this information with you so that you can influence the decisions from elected officials that do have a say over this problem that's facing America. High prescription prices, high insurance premiums, high co-pays. We all know what the problem associated with multi-tier pricing is. I just would respectfully like the board to keep in mind the practice of discriminatory multi-tier pricing, which is how the drug industry forces this on Americans. We can talk about research, we can talk about marketing, education of the medical profession and all of that, but the destruction to us and to our social programs is terrible. And a couple of things, when the drug industry helped author the Medicare Part D program back in 2006 when it was enacted, they made sure to include the stipulation in there that the U.S. federal government apparently cannot seek special pricing. It's absurd. So this is why I understand as a board you can't affect the legislation directly, but indirectly you are a powerful group. At meetings or in private, you can discuss discriminatory multi-tier pricing. I put some flow charts in there that it seems a little difficult to follow, but it's based off of feedback mechanisms from school. When you see the bad that's done, you see the recovery and how it's done, and you'll see from that I don't know. I just look at it as just, again, the total destruction of the health care program through discriminatory pricing. So anyway, I won't bore you with anything more, but I'm glad that the meeting is upcoming. I thought I was just going to be presenting this after the fact. So everybody in this room is a consumer. All of us are indirectly or directly affected by multi-tier pricing through the cost shifting to the price of groceries that we all use, as well as sundries that we buy. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping in any business that's got prescriptions. They are losing tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're all paying for it as consumers. So let's not forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
It is an important topic. Okay. I've also been asked to speak a little bit about the immunization implementation regulation, which is the reporting specifically to the immunization registries. Right now, we have I'm looking through all my paper for the one I need. Well, I'll do it ad lib, maybe. Did you take my paper? I'm going to blend it on the boss.
Where's the?
I may have to come back to this one because I want to be able to, there's actually some dates in some counties. No, it's an email. Oh, I have an email, though. I could do it that way, I suppose. Yeah, we just have too much paper sitting here. Yeah, I don't think you have it. It's somewhere sitting out here somewhere. Well, anyway, I will come back to it. The issue is that our immunization reg is currently in effect right now. As we work with the Department of Public Health to coordinate the reporting of immunizations into the immunization registry, which the regulation requires be done within 14 days, we learned that there's some issues that could have been better perhaps dealt with when we had our reg pending, but after the fact it doesn't really particularly damage anything, it just makes it a little more complicated. Our regulation requires pharmacists to report all immunizations provided to the immunization registry within 14 days. In order to do that, one of the requirements is the pharmacy itself has got to be registered to be able to report the data. It is the pharmacy that is the pharmacist that reports it, but the pharmacy itself has to be registered to report the data. So that is we've explained that. We've got some information on our website to address that. But the other
Are you saying registered with the Board of Pharmacy?
No, registered with the immunization registry, and there's a process on place. We have links on our website that take you directly through to the CARES website, which is the entity that operates the immunization registry. And so at this time, where we are is we have 3 counties that have not converted to the if you submit data electronically, you're able to submit it to CARES, too close to CARES, right now. If you're doing it manually, you cannot do it currently in 3 counties, as I understand it, or it's complicated in 3 counties, which will be brought up. There's a group that will be brought up in December, and there's the last group that will be brought up in March. Did you find the document?
No, I'm just fine.
Okay.
I was just looking up the immunization registry language.
Well, I have a ton of documents.
Is it an email you sent, or?
No, it's actually the thing we got from Public Health that we're putting on the website. I just can't. It was there, but who knows? There's paper everywhere here. But what in fact, why don't we just stop right now and I'll find the document and then I'll come back to it later on so that I can give a more thorough, accurate report for everyone. Which then leaves us to go to the next item is an update from the medical board. Unfortunately, although I met with the medical board's executive director last week, I didn't get a full report from her on what's going on at the medical board, but we did discuss a few matters that we will be discussing in the coming weeks. One of them is the issue of compounding in prescribers' offices. It's one of the issues that this board has brought up, and her board is very much aware that we have some interest in this area. So we're going to begin discussions executive officer to executive director. She is an executive director. That's one thing. We are also going to be discussing their pain guidelines for the medical board. The medical board developed pain guidelines, and then approximately 18 months later, the CDC developed pain management guidelines as well to deal with opioids. They are in the process now of rectifying their policy with that of the CDC. And so once that's done, we will be provided with what the revised policy is through the medical board. And there was one other issue, which of course, because I can't find my notes, how could I sit here with all this paper? Oh, here's part of it. So collaborative practice agreements. I want to talk a little bit with the medical board and find out how the aftermath of SB 493 has gone with respect to the physician notification piece between the pharmacies and the pharmacists and the physicians to make sure that's smooth, that they're aware that this is coming. And so that is one of the other items. And then the final one is the issue of prescribers operating dispensing machines. We're continuing to see that become an issue, much like it is in pharmacy. So we're going to talk a little bit about our requirements with them and then figure out where they wish to go in this area.
So are they currently allowing for dispensing machines for providers?
They are not particularly involved whatsoever in this because for them, prescribers under our law in 4170 can dispense but only to their own patients. And so it's pretty limited, and there's a specific provision in that law that addresses whether or not, how they can handle an automated dispensing system to begin with. So again, this is just two boards with interest in the same area having an opportunity to speak. We will both be providing reports back to our respective boards after this meeting, and this is something we'll be doing for a period of time. One of the things that we are...
When did you say it's a series of meetings? Is that what you're...
We're just going to start meeting. We've got interests and we've got various issues that are shared between the medical board and the Board of Pharmacy. It's important that we bring our boards together now, especially we've got some major policy things that we've done with respect to naloxone and some of the other things that we've done, and particularly to implement SB 493. We need to work collaboratively with the medical board as well as our licensees working collaboratively together. Unfortunately, the one problem we do have is we seem to have Board of Pharmacy board meetings at the same week, almost identical days that the medical board has their meetings. So we have to work this out. And then this year, the medical board has the added opportunity to do their sunset review. So they're also very busy right now since their report has just been submitted. So anyway, that's an update because at the last board meeting in July, we talked a little bit that we were going to be going here. So that's where we're going. And we had a meeting last week, but it was just more of an informal meeting. And then finally, the last, are there any questions before I go on? If any of you have topics you think that we need to discuss, please feel free to let me know and we'll start bringing it forward. The final thing on my EO report deals with the examination statistics for the NAPLEX and the CPJE. And this, I do know where my paperwork is. So I'll hold you in suspense on the other one, but here is where we are here. Over the last couple of years, the overall pass rate on the CPJE has started to go down. This is also commensurate with a similar decrease in the pass rate on the NAPLEX. So in the board meeting materials, we have provided you with the passing scores for the CPJE and for the NAPLEX. In the case of the CPJE, and one of the things that you look at, we have a chart that displays over a 3-year period pass rates overall in the exams, and I'm just going to talk at the high level. We have more detailed statistics in the packet. But we have a group of people that take the exam between October and March, and then we report their scores, and then we also report scores for the beginning of April through the end of September. Generally, the people that take the exam from the beginning of April through the end of September are June graduates and first-time test takers. Those statistically are handled a little differently in the parlance of psychometric evaluation than the people that take the exam multiple times. So you kind of look at first-time test takers differently than you do all takers. So over a period of time, our passing score on the CPJE in 2014 for that period between April and September of 2014 was 83.4%. It stayed almost constant in April 15 to June 30th of 2015 at 84.7%. And then this April, after we changed the exam, it went to 70%. So there's a big drop-off. But the Board of Pharmacy isn't out there by itself with this, noticing this decreasing passing score. The NABP exam went from the same period, from the same individuals that took our exam, because I have two sets of numbers here. It went from 96% in 2014 to stayed the same, 96% in 2015, and it dropped to 91% in the last year. So we're seeing a downward trend. But where you really see the trend, oh boy, what in this? Well, I can use that. One of the things that you can look at is the scores by California scores, and we have in the book, in the packet, the same stats that we normally release, and you can see the overall passing score on the CPJE is sitting at 92% for California schools, 82%, sorry, and the NAPLEX pass rate is 92% for California schools. And then you can see, for those of you that are graduates of particular pharmacy schools, we have the stats that you can look to see how your current graduating students have passed. One of the things that you'll see over a period of time is that we've got relatively low stats for a number of schools if you're out of state. In California, we've got higher numbers, and so you can maybe make a little more meaningful conclusion. But I have one more series of stats I wanted to share from NABP that I got directly from them.
Well, while you're doing that, can I ask you a question?
Please, here it is. Found it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is from NABP itself, and this one is stats that they released that it's okay for me to release, I asked. But here is from 2014 to 2016, the overall change in people taking the NAPLEX. And keep in mind that they have changed their exam a little bit as we have, and they're making additional changes to their exam structure in November 1. In 2014, the overall pass rate was 94.8%, almost 95%. In 2015, it dropped to 92.6%, and in 2016, it dropped to 88%. So you see that overall, the passing scores on both of the exams that we use in California is starting to decline a little bit. It is what it is. We're just being upfront and reporting the stats so that you're aware that this has occurred. Okay, Stan, I'm all set for you.
Okay. In the past, we have talked about the CPJE exam and the focus of the exam. And so, it might have been 2-3 years ago when we talked about should the exam focus more on California law rather than being as general as it was or appeared to be. And the purpose of the exam is given the fact that to qualify for licensure, general pharmacy expertise is tested with NAPLEX. So with regards to CPJE, has the focus changed, and are we seeing it to be more reflective of an exam that tests the law as opposed to the general education of the pharmacy student?
The board's exam committee spends a lot of time working to make certain it does not test the same information that the NAPLEX tests. And as the NAPLEX is now becoming ever more increasingly clinical in its assessment of pharmacist skills, it coincides with the board's simultaneous direction to start focusing perhaps a bit more on adding law questions that are more pure law questions to the exam. So the current composition of the exam now has a greater number of purely law questions than formerly, which is perhaps part of the reason that the pass score is so different. We don't know.
And Alan, I know you're on that competency committee. I mean, is there a discussion? What do you make of these numbers and the lowering? Do you think it's more of a focus on the law?
Well, you know, I'm quite surprised with the results here. We have started increasing the number of law questions, and to elaborate on Jenny's comment about the pure law questions, a lot of them are applied law questions, and I think in the discussions, oftentimes with these applied law questions, it requires a true understanding of the law rather than just a superficial reading of it.
Like a regurgitation.
Yeah, which oftentimes test takers are used to giving. And so I think the next set of results that we get will be a little more telling, because there are more law questions, it's more applied law questions, and so indeed it might make a difference. You know, it might be in the past the California exam was more clinically focused, and so like Stan says, it was almost a repeat of the NAPLEX, maybe even a little more clinical than that. They're trying to get away from that because they've already been tested on that. So what's the sense of it? And the name of the exam is the jurisprudence exam, so it should be on law, and that's the reason that we're giving it. And so when we went to this new law format 20 years ago, 25 years ago, California was leading the nation as far as clinical services go, and we had to make sure that we were testing on that. So the philosophy of the exam has changed, and so it'll be interesting to see what results. We've gone to because of these results, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that the exam is accurate, verifiable, and there's true validity to these results. So we're not doubting the exam.
Do these results demonstrate the change in the exam already, or is that pending?
I don't know. I think we'll be able to tell with the.
We changed the exam, so,
Yeah.
so the stats that we're looking at now are different. But if you look at the MPJE, which is what all other states except for, I think, 3 of us have our own state exam. But the MPJE from 2014, the overall pass rate there was 95%. It decreased to 94% in 2015. It decreased to 85% this year. So the shift that we're seeing in our pass rate is also being evidenced to pretty much, we're moving together with NEVP. Part of it, keep in mind that we've now got a number more pharmacy schools. The applicant pool itself has changed, and we've got some schools that can't even fill all of its seats. And whereas before it used to be very difficult to get into certain pharmacy schools, I've been told now by some deans that pretty much that if you apply to a school of pharmacy and apply to enough of them, you will find your way in. There are that many places.
I've been trying to ask a question.
I'm sorry.
So for what it's worth, it's just that we've got a different kind of environment than we had during the crisis when we had a pharmacist shortage. Somebody's gonna get hit with a microphone, it looks like. Perhaps it's gonna be me.
But
Get the cameras ready, we're gonna need them.
but we have sample questions.
Exactly.
And our sample questions do reflect this new applied law methodology, correct?
Right, we have more than that. We have a content outline where we show specific areas that will be tested and how many questions will be drawn from each one of the 3 major categories. So yes, that information is out there.
We've given it.
Yeah, oh no, we did, and we started doing that well in advance of the exam change in April of 2016. So we have done what we've needed to do there.
It's interesting, though, the #1 school is a newer school.
The newest, yeah.
So, Josh, do you
No,
want to?
you go. You go first.
Okay, may I borrow the microphone just for short period?
Can we scoot down a little bit, Alan?
Your point about the amount of seats available at pharmacy schools is a very valid one. As different colleges and universities look to attract even a dwindling number of high school graduates now in California, it's my understanding that the graduating classes are getting smaller. So a dwindling number of the pool of graduates. And as they look at that pool, and here in California now we have so many more pharmacy schools, trying to attract trying to get their numbers in. And one of the variables is, the acceptable student scores on either SAT or ACT, and it could be that in their effort to fill their seats, that they have to reduce the quality of the student that they were accustomed to getting, or the new students for the new schools, and that could be affecting the academic ability of the graduates.
I think that's what Jenny said.
Well, I agree.
I don't think that's true, though. I mean, I'm seeing the UCSF the statistic. I mean, they got the biggest pool. I mean, the score is so low. I'm surprised to see that. I mean, they got a very big pool student to choose from. So I don't think that's the case.
Well, they had a little problem with the CPJE, but if you look at the NAPLEX, they did well on the NAPLEX. So again, part of that may be the focus of the curriculum. It may be
Yeah.
more clinical, less
Yeah,
on California
they
law.
always do it, they always do it.
But nonetheless,
When did the test change?
April 2016.
So I'm hearing expressions of alarm at this dropping rate, which
It
is
is
totally
true.
understandable, but just want to remind everybody that, for instance, the bar exam has a pass rate of about 50%. So, you know, I don't know what your target is or what you prefer, but I just would remind you that other professions don't necessarily have this expectation that you'll have such a high pass rate.
Well, that's true, Josh. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at these NAPLEX exam pass rates. You know, when in your classroom, not everybody is the sharpest. You know, there's a lot of people that should be flunking here. And
Why do you look at me when you say that?
I didn't think you were sharp enough to catch that.
Madam President.
I hope you're
And
kidding,
before you
Ryan,
got-
because I don't want to get into it.
Ryan, before you got here, we were already talking about the lack of training of some individuals.
Oh, yeah, I need reorientation, evidently.
Well, I mean, what they tell you for the bar exam in your bar preparation is that, especially if you're taking the February bar, which is when people are taking it for a repeat, all you have to do is sit, when you're sitting at the table, is identify 3 people at your table that you're fairly sure are not going to pass, and then you'll feel better about your chances of passing.
No, it's
Thank you,
Josh's
Counselor.
comments that I'm surprised the NAPLEX is so high because of
Yeah,
that. Because the NAPLEX, if you think about it, that's the real pharmacist content. That's pretty high for
But
us.
but the surprising thing is that 85% on the MPJE.
Yeah.
That is a surprise. So anyway, NEBP is going through the same kind of thing that we're doing. And again, at the end of the day, we spend a lot of money. A good portion of our exam budget goes to the psychometric firm that has to validate our exam. And we spend a lot of time validating the questions, working on the questions. And those of you that have heard me say this, the exam questions are not written Friday night over a bunch of beers. They spend a lot of time, really, every single word is very carefully evaluated, and they work very hard at making sure that all of the distractors or the various alternative answers on the exam are in fact reasonable alternatives so that you really do measure knowledge. And they spend a lot of time doing this, and we also know that there's some issues out there with possible dishonest conduct with respect to the questions after people leave the exam. And that is a big concern for us because we are measuring minimum competency in a pharmacist on this exam. And should we end up making a mistake licensing-wise and licensing someone that is not minimally competent because they got questions from someone is a real problem for us. And that's a constant risk we assess against. And for those of you that are aware of one of our regs, that if you want to take the law exam, we actually have a requirement that if you're caught cheating on the exam or accessing a cell phone or doing any number of other things that can possibly either mean you're cheating or you're trying to compromise the exam, you sit out from being a pharmacist in California for 3 years, flat out. So. And on that cheery note, I think that concludes my EO report. Once I find my immunization material, I'd like another 5 minutes with the microphone, but absent that.
Well, don't sit next to Stan. Good luck.
Okay, we'll open up for public comment.
I have to get my own AV team.
Good morning, Steve.
Steve Gray. Let me put my 2 hats on. One as a teacher of pharmacy ethics and law at one of the universities, in which I share the course with 2 past presidents of the boards of pharmacy, John Jones and Ken Schell. At the end of each year, we do a refresher to the 4th-year students who are about to take the exam because they got their pharmacy law training at most schools, usually within the first quarter or first semester. And they get virtually nothing in between. Now, that's not true of all schools, but the growing trend is that because the curriculum is so full, they need that information up front because they're going to be going into internships and IPPEs and so forth. So they need that information up front, but they don't get much after that. And they get very little of what was referred to as the application because, in the first, you're only given, 2 hours a week for the first quarter And basically during that time, all you can do is read the book and say, well, this means and so forth, but you don't, and they don't have any experience yet. So it's difficult for us in that short time to fold in how it applies. We try our best, and we think we do a pretty good job. So I think that's one of the problems you may be seeing as it goes to more applied. And remember, the California exam is not the CPJE, it's the California Pharmacy Practice Standards and Jurisprudence exam, and that was deliberate. It folds in the applied into the application of clinical standards for treatment of care and so forth. The second thing I want to mention in my hat as I'm currently president of the American Society for Pharmacy Law, and since I was on the board several years ago, we created a pharmacy law special interest group there where we're continuing to attract more and more members to the society and have special programming for them to try to build in some kind of energy for nationwide standards on the teaching of pharmacy law and ethics, which is, again, quite different all across the country. We have our next meeting coming up in November in Austin, Texas, and in that special session where we try to attract teachers of pharmacy law, we expect to have about now 60 members go to that special 2 or 3 hour session where we're trying to develop standards. We did a survey this year of all the schools trying to get information. We even went to speak at the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy annual meeting in Anaheim a month or so ago. So my point is we recognize that there are some issues with pharmacy law and ethics, the way it's taught, the way it's maybe not fully covered to, you know, how do you apply this in your profession, and we're trying to build those standards. And we appreciate anything the board can do to help this along, and we offer our services. One of the things I did after the meeting in Irvine, where it was discussed that the CP pharmacy practice standards and jurisprudence exam needed to change, and it did change. If you remember there, I think it was Board Member Weiser who made an emphasis that it especially needed to change about the way pharmacy consultation requirements are taught and the expectations and so forth. So after my students took this exam, I just asked a general question. I prefaced it very carefully, say, I don't want to hear any questions. I don't want to hear the question, but did you get an impression from this exam that you took since April as to whether pharmacy consultation was emphasized? And the uniform answer was, no, I didn't have that impression. I don't even remember any question about pharmacy consultation. Now remember, that's an N of maybe a dozen students I talked to. So it's not, you know, there are others may have
how you ask
more.
questions about what's on the exam, by the way.
No, but what I was trying to get at was this goal that was expressed at the Board of Pharmacy meeting, was it accomplished in a way that the students recognized it? Because we wanted to be sure that we were emphasizing it in our review course, because that was a difference between the 4 years earlier that the students got, where we told them what was going to be on the exam. So I just want to report back that it might be good to do some sensing of those who took the exam as to what they thought about it, whether it was balanced in terms of clinical standards and practice standards versus law and so forth. Because just to be candid, I'm not getting the impression that it is or that it's changed much. We've always known that California's pharmacy licensure exam before 2004 had a really different pass rate, had a different emphasis. I think most of the people on the board took it way back then because you could not reciprocate unless you took it, and that the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy exam was much easier because we all ran over to Nevada or Arizona or Hawaii and took it, and it was amazingly simple. But they have done a significant revamping of the NABP exam. And I think they need to be complimented for that. And I think your scores reflect the fact that we can no longer expect, you know, nationwide, you know, 98% pass rates and things like that, because it's just, you know, it's a tougher exam. And it's graded differently. And that's the other thing that was not talked about, was that the grading process is different for the NAPLEX than it was before also, and the way they evaluated it. So there are big changes.
As you're making your comments, I'm just wondering also, could there also be a factor that more and more of the interns don't have as much practical experience as they used to. And the schools are focusing a lot more on the clinical aspects. Could that be? Because, I mean, a lot of this, if it's applied, some of that you learn while you're working.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. In fact, we've had this debate in California for the last several years. It was a major debate at the House of Delegates at CSHP last year, et cetera. We are finding, of course, in our application process that our applicants for pharmacist jobs, much fewer students are coming with actual work experience. And I'm not even talking about work experience in a pharmacy. They're not coming with work experience at McDonald's, or anything. And so we're actually in the process of changing our job descriptions to where work experience will be required, not preferred. Preferred will be in a pharmacy or a hospital or some clinical setting, but just work experience. So, we're finding that what you could it be is actually true. So we're changing that. And
well,
as you now,
thinking that when we were talking with ACPE, when they were actually here, that was part of the impetus behind the change in their model, is because the real life experience of the pharmacy students had gotten so small that it had to happen all through the universities.
Well, part of the problem is that with the proliferation of schools and the increase in students, and those are two separate things, because actually there are more students graduating from the former traditional schools than there are that can be accounted for from the new schools. So it's the increase in class size is having a greater impact on the number of graduates than the actual new schools. Many of the new schools are only 30, 40, 50 students.
Is that nationwide or is that in California?
Nationwide.
Nationwide.
That's the nationwide impact. Some schools graduate 500 a year, and that's at the upper end, but that's the thing. So we're seeing a significant problem that has been on the East Coast for 30 years, which is finding practice sites. And schools are having to pay hospitals, pharmacies, and institutions now to put their students in. That's been done for 30 years east of the Rockies, including Denver. But California now, the schools are out there trying to find pharmacies, hospitals, and others that they can pay them to take their students. Because they're trying to find practice sites.
And my reference wasn't so much to practice sites. It was when I went to school, most people did intern, and you worked somewhere. You'd work hospital, you'd work retail, but you learned firsthand how to fill a prescription and what things to consider. And you'd have a mentor, because you'd have a pharmacist who would be that mentor while you're training, and you'd have a significant amount of hours. But now it just seems, and I agree with you, I'm finding the same thing with applicants, is that more and more of them just have never worked or interned. So their first time they see a pharmacy sometimes is on their rotations.
When you look at our results here, there's 7 schools, and we're growing to how many? 8 schools?
13.
No, 13.
We're looking at
15?
From 8 to 13.
18? Well, I think we're pretty close to heading towards 13.
13.
So, I mean, I'm kind of worried that, kind of as Stan said and you said also, that, we're going to have a lot more students and maybe a lower qualification standard. So we might have to, as, what's your name again? Josh.
State Bar.
As Josh, said, that, we might have to get comfortable with a lower pass rate.
Well, the CPA exam average pass rate is between 45 and 50%.
So, just like the attorneys.
So just like the attorneys.
Yeah, so the attorneys and CPAs are equally as dumb.
Either that or we're too soft on you.
Yeah, but I mean, the one difference for CPAs, you don't really graduate with a degree in CPA, right? You graduate with a degree in accounting, and then, I mean, it's a little different.
Well, it is different
from
the standpoint that you don't go to a separate school of, in other words, like in other words, you don't have a pharmacy school, you don't have a CPA school.
Right.
What you get is a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration majoring in accounting.
But
or a master's.
Just to add on, I deal with all the schools in California. I write the contracts for them to come into Kaiser facilities, and I had just visited a couple of the new schools within the last month. My point is, what I'm finding is that their admission standards are very high. Most of the new schools now require a bachelor's degree in order to get in. That was not the case, when I got into school. But my point is, I don't think it's the academic standards that are concerned. But a lot of these students, like I said, have no work experience. They have no life experience, et cetera, et cetera. That may be more of an issue than, the academic standard that they're coming in with. Many of them have master's degrees even. We have students that have RN licenses and others where they said, I can't make enough money as an RN. And so, things of that nature. So I would be a little careful in thinking that the academic admission standards have gone down. That may in effect eventually be true, but I'm not seeing that. I've seen very bright, but I asked the students, why did you get into pharmacy school? An amazing number of them say it's unrelated to, family history in pharmacy, interest in healthcare. The money is very attractive. And so that's a third of the class that I just spoke to yesterday or this week said that the main reason they went to pharmacy school was the money.
Well, I think another factor in it, and the fact that you say that, is there's a lot of, the market's flooded. There's a lot of pharmacists out there. And at the tuition rate that some of these pharmacy schools are charging, they're looking at the return on investment and thinking, I'm going to graduate in 4 years. What am I going to really find a job, and what is it going to pay?
Yeah, and the reality is, and this is what they see though, that if you graduate from a pharmacy school in California, within a year as an individual, you will be in the top 5% of income earners in the country. And I always tell them, and if you marry a student, you're in the top 3%. So look to your left, look to your right, and you can figure that out. But the other thing to keep in mind, why do we have so many schools?
How's the agenda doing here, Laura?
The American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, I think you should get them out here to speak maybe, but they can give you the history of what's going on and happening and the standards. But for example, they released their report on income of for-profit schools. There's a 43% return on the dollar in 2014 for for-profit schools. And so that's what's 43% ROI for for-profit schools. So as that goes down, perhaps you may have a different, some schools going out of business or whatever. But I bring this to you because I think we need to be real careful about the assumptions we're making and what's causing this. And it may be that the curriculum with all the new drugs, all the new diseases, all the new practice abilities is just so full that there's not much room for law and ethics, is basically what they're telling me.
It's kind of what happened with sterile compounding years ago.
Right.
And Steve, I want to answer you in reference to your the question on Stan's suggestion about patient consultation. Even though Stan made the suggestions that we're going to change something on the exam, but understand that the competency committee consists of many members, and you have to vet through the committee to set the questions. So you're not going to see that questions right on this exam.
Yeah.
It takes a while. That's why when you ask a student, do you recall seeing a questions? No, there hasn't been one settled yet because it takes a while before the members could go through the questions.
But the board does test consultation in various ways. It's just not the standard way. But they assess whether comprehension, whether or not the pharmacist can evaluate whether or not a patient understands therapy, for example, things of that nature. But it's done subtly because we don't have an oral consultation requirement as part of the exam. We don't have that kind of a test structure, and to test as many people as we do in an oral interview setting would be so time consuming and so expensive, frankly, in terms of what it takes to do an oral exam, that we can't do it. So what we're doing instead is pushing consultation every way we can and then enforcing against those that don't consult when they're required to. It's perhaps not ideal, but it's the way we're doing it.
I certainly don't want to diminish the tremendous impact that Dr. Shad has on the competency committee.
He has a great impact.
Wait, I just want to know, how long have you been on that committee?
About 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But to me, it's curious as to, I realize it's a relatively autonomous committee, and it's curious, it's curious as to how does the competency committee or how do we communicate with the competency committee with regards to our views and our wishes and our concerns about the CPJE?
I think we can actually go. All of us are supposed to be rotating on the competency
Send him
committee.
to one of the committee meetings.
I think we all can attend, and that's one of the things we've put in the new committee membership, is that all the professional members rotate through along with, Alan's our.
Though I think in the past, your concern is valid.
Well, I think that, I was thinking that there is some feedback that comes from the board, that we go through kind of the goals, and because we've done that a couple times in board meetings, we've kind of gone through and provided feedback to the competency committee.
But I think Stan's point, let me speak for you, Stan.
Thank you. It's either you or Debbie. So.
And we're doing a pretty good job, I'm thinking. But, you know, we speak about it, but a lot of times it's not truly transferred to the membership of the board. I think there's been a.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but that's why we have board members there, and I know that Victor.
Exactly.
That's part of what. I mean, I know that Victor was pretty vocal when he was on there, so.
Well, I think we're all supposed to be going and rotating through along with Alan. I think we're just going to get more active at increasing and improving, making sure someone's assigned. Josh.
I was just going to say that this level of interest in this subject is admirable and wonderful. I just want to remind the board members that it's 11. And you tend to have, there's a little bit of a tendency to be very interested in things that happen early in the morning.
Yeah, I agree.
And then as the day goes on, to run out of time to talk about the things that you get to. So
that is true, Josh. And in that vein, let's do a bio break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back around 11:10.
Thank you.
Oh, my.